Hello and welcome to Buttpluggin with qDot and Teledildonics 101. I am qDot, also known as Kyle Mishulis. I will be your host for today as we talk about the basics of teledildonics. Now, I will say first off, I had no idea that I was not streaming for the last 10 minutes, so I've been sitting here talking to myself. I did not realize that there are two buttons you have to hit on YouTube, so here we are. And I am going to tweet real quick. Okay. Now everyone knows I forgot to hit a button. So, yeah, so what we're going to be going over here, this first part of Teledildonics 101 is probably going to be about 4 lectures. This is going to be going from the absolute basics of here's the history of teledildonics, here's where all this stuff came from, all the way up and through here's how we build teledildonic applications. Here is what you should expect there, and also providing a framework to analyze teledildonic applications. So the first lecture here today is probably going to be 1 to 2 hours. I have not actually rehearsed this. I came up with this idea 24 hours ago. So we're all kind of on this ride together. And I'm hoping it'll take an hour or two. I've only got about 20 slides, but there's a lot of stuff in the middle of that to go through. So this today will provide the basis. This is going to be the history of teledildonics, which I will go through quickly. I've done other talks on that before. It's kind of a worn out subject these days. I would like to just talk about creating new shit. Also, I will note that my webcam is now apparently on the fritz, so every so often I'm going to have to reboot it like that. Actually, let me also see if I can turn it down a little bit. I have it running at 4K, and it is, I think, saturating my USB bus. Okay, there we go. Let's see if that fixes anything, too. So, anyways, I was saying something. Anyways, so we're going to be going over both how to build applications and then how to kind of analyze teledildonics usage. So thinking about when a user is interacting intimately with another user or with some sort of interface, how do we analyze that? How do we build for that situation? So like I said, this will take probably about 4 lectures up front just to get us from that basis through a simple web application. And then going on from there, there will be the Teledildonics 201 series. And at that point, we'll be looking at how does this interact with video games? How does this interact with movies? Like, how do we build applications to work with content or to work with other users? I should also say for Teledildonics 101, when we are building an application here, this is going to be for a person-to-person, a dyadic interaction, because that's pretty easy to do. It's really once you get into like the central hub that can connect multiple people in multiple ways that things get all crazy, and I just want to start this out simply and build up from that basis. So without further ado, let's go over to PowerPoint, which is going to be on the wrong damn slide. Okay, it's not that wrong though. Okay, here we go. And my window got way smaller. And my camera froze again. Oh my god. Here we go. There. Okay. And we're back. So first off, I was hoping not to have to do this with slides, but I tried yesterday of using my iPad as a whiteboard to draw out everything I was going to talk about, and that went horribly. So here we are with sexy PowerPoint. First off, welcome to the talk. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to throw them out in the in the YouTube chat. I will be trying to watch that. You can also hit me up via Twitter DMs or something. That will definitely get my attention. So first off, who the hell am I, and why are you watching me talk about Teledildonics? I am Kyle Mishulis, also known as qDot. We already went through that. I have been a blogger in sex tech, for whatever that means, since about 2004. I started a blog called Slashdong back then. It was really funny at the time because Slashdot was a thing. Now it just sounds like a weird genital mutilation thing. So in 2011, I pivoted that over to Metafetish, which still exists to this day, but there's not really a lot going on with it. I don't really have a ton of time to write lately. I am an engineer that's worked on all sorts of shit, both hardware, software, mechanical, electrical, software stuff. I've been in robotics, self-driving cars, video games, web browsers, all sorts of shit. But for this is specifically about like my sex tech industry work. In the sex tech industry, I mostly work in consulting. So I don't do a lot of product building or anything else. Basically, I go in and tell companies what to do. And on top of that, I also maintain the Buttplug project at buttplug.io, which will be referenced constantly through this. Which is a framework that allows you to quickly and easily write software for a bunch of different types of sex toys. Like I believe right now we support about 140 different types of sex toys. And I'm also a a budding science and technology studies researcher. This is the application of critical theory to science and technology. I've been working lately on the ideas of bodies, spaces, and digital intimacy, which a lot of the later portion of today's talk is going to be based on. Like, how do we actually analyze what people's bodies are doing while they are using this intimate technology? Finally, if you're curious about anything else, there is all sorts of information about me at kyle.mishulis/about. On to the next slide. Here is every single way ever to contact me. I'm available on Twitter at qDot or at Buttplug.io, where I play a butt plug. Or Metafetish is the site for, or the Twitter for the blog. It's not updated quite as often. qDot and Buttplug.io are the two most updated ones. If you're interested in talking to me and about 1,000 other people in the community on Discord, we have a Discord server at discord.buttplug.io. I have multiple GitHub accounts between my personal one, and then Buttplug has its own organization, and Interface, which is our set of applications that are built on top of Buttplug, has its own organization. And finally, I do have a Patreon. However, if there is anything else that you can give your money to that is more worth it right now, like, I mean, people are getting laid off. People that are working in service and gig jobs need extra help. Put your money there first. If you have something that you specifically need in the sex tech industry, or you need the specific news that I give, feel free to sign up to my Patreon, but really give to those that really need it first. So, why am I giving a talk about Teledildonics right now? So I have given talks on Teledildonics before. I have worked with art institutions and colleges and universities and maker institutions to actually give in-person workshops. But I've never really put a lot of that information online. On my YouTube channel, which I should have put in the last thing, but obviously if you're here, you know about it. The content is mostly stuff I'm making up at the time. With the way things are going right now, though, this seemed like a good time to actually give people a little bit more explanation about what digital remote intimacy is, because right now, digital remote intimacy is safety. So the whole COVID-19 thing means we're all sitting at home right now as we should be. So, like, social distancing is important. Self-isolation is important to make sure that we flatten the curve. But while we're doing that, it's we've got to entertain ourselves, and so I'm hoping this information will be entertaining. Now, I don't really want this to be making light of the current situation right now. Like, people are sick and dying. I personally am taking care of a partner who is immunocompromised. This whole thing fucking sucks. Really bad. But people are now thinking about spaces and bodies too. If you watch any sort of social media right now, there's just constant memes about social distancing and all of these other sorts of mitigations that we're taking on for COVID-19. And teledildonics and intimate remote relations are, as weird as it sounds to say it, part of this. They are part of this overall idea of proxemics, of the analysis of bodies in space. And so teledildonics and how we can be remotely intimate with people that we would like to be able to see but can't get to, can't touch right now is very important, can actually provide us a lens to analyze this situation through, while also, I'm not going to lie, it provides a distraction. This can be funny, this can be interesting, and that is fine. People need distractions too. So, next slide. Going through a couple of business matters while I get started with this. These are just a couple of boring points. First off, all of these videos and information are going to be CC by SA licensed. So this that is the Creative Commons by attribution share alike. I'm not putting no commercial on this because someday someone might want to show this in a classroom. I'm really curious what classroom that would be, but there you go. And non-commercial gets really weird there, so I'm fine with going non-commercial there, or fine with bypassing the non-commercial part of the license there. The slides that I'm showing right now and these lecture notes will be available at some point. I just set up a single page at buttplug.io/videos. And that is where you'll be able to get these. This video will be, of course, on YouTube. I'm also recording it locally right now, and I'll be putting it on Pornhub and the Internet Archive, because there is a good chance that someday YouTube is going to kick me off. Due to the type of content that I have, it is like right on that border. I've already gotten a content strike because I accidentally posted a website once that itself linked to porn. So you never quite know what's going to live and die on YouTube. But so I want to make sure that this is available in as many places as possible. So Pornhub and the Internet Archive, it is. So what you can expect from this Teledildonics 101 lecture series. The first part, this is the part that we're in today. This will be a quick thing on teledildonics history. So where does teledildonics come from? What have the last couple of decades looked like? Only a few slides, not that big of a deal. And then we're going to come up with a framework for analyzing digital intimacy interfaces. Sounds pretty dry. I think it's interesting. I hope everyone will think it's interesting too. Once we're done with that, part 2, which may be tomorrow, maybe a little later, depending on how much time I have to put together yet another slide deck and all, is going to be about designing simple teledildonics interface using the framework that we come up with today. So this will still be design, no code yet. There's going to be probably no code in the first 2 lectures. We won't get to that till lecture 3. The application we are designing will be, like I said, for 2 users and for direct toy control. So you'll have one user somewhere, one user somewhere else. They can share their toys with each other, creating an interface to provide consent for the usage of those, and then there will be like a slider to control vibrations, vibration speed or something like that. Not super complicated, but enough to get us all started. And from there, like, that's kind of like the take home from this. This is also going to live on glitch.com, so all of the programming will be on the web. I'll be trying to use just pure in browser, ES6, no jQuery, no TypeScript. It's gonna fucking kill me. I love my TypeScript, but to make sure that this is accessible as possible, I want to make sure that everyone can understand it and that it's easy to work with. And TypeScript requires the transpiling step and whatnot. Now, but this is all going to be built on top of Buttplug, the library, and Buttplug does come in multiple languages. We have full implementations in JavaScript, C#, and Rust, and Python can access the server side of those, which is something I'll get into in part 3. So you don't have to do this in JavaScript, and I will probably be recoding all of these examples in these different languages, but for now, this is just going to be the JavaScript because it's the easiest to show off and easiest to share. And in part 3, we will not actually get all the way to Teledildonics. What we want to do first is make an application that can just control toys on your side. So you don't have to worry about going to the network yet. You can just make sure your own toy works. And then in part 4, we will actually add the network part. So how do we connect to each other? Are we going to need a central server, or are we going to use some sort of peer-to-peer mechanism, something like that? Inside of that, there's a lot of interesting questions about, like, well, is it going to be secure? And I'm not going to promise too much there up front. This is there. You already get some security here just because you're not connecting to a big shared service, but security in this stuff is incredibly difficult. So that's a point I'll be harping on throughout this whole thing, and we'll talk about what's secure, what's not, why it's not secure, what precautions you should take, what you might be able to get away with, so on and so forth. And then there's the question of, well, what's past 101? There will be a Teledildonics 201 plus if this works out. We're all going to be at home a while. And I've wanted to make more videos about this stuff for a long time, so hopefully I can just shove stuff together and it will all work out. So once we've got that basic application that we can start building new and neat stuff on, then we can go a bunch of different directions. And this 201 is a little bit less structured. This is just going to be kind of, oh hey, what can we hook this up to? So we'll have made that 2-person application. It'll talk to the network. But then we can talk about, well, how do we create an API for, say, a Telegram bot or a Discord bot, or accessing this through Second Life or Neos VR or VR chat or something like that. We'll also look at other Buttplug applications that have already been written. There is SyncyDink, which is a hardware synced movie player that I built using purely web technologies. So it's basically you just open a web browser, load up a movie, load up a file, and connect it to a toy, and suddenly, like, the toy is synced to the movement of the video and whatnot. And then there's the game haptics router, which is another piece of software I wrote that reroutes gamepad vibration. So, like, whenever you're playing a video game and your controller vibrates, it will reroute this over to a sex toy. Super popular right now. There was just a tweet last week of someone using this with Dark Souls. It was pretty cool. So that's seeing a lot of attention right now. We'll also talk about making new applications. Like, we can go outside of what we can do with JavaScript and whatnot. We can start talking about game engines because I've built stuff that works with Twine. Still working on Unity, but would love to talk about that more. People really want Unity stuff. I've also got I was supposed to be doing a talk at the Game Developers Conference tomorrow. Obviously not happening now, but I still need to film it, and that'll be up here soon too. We'll maybe get into making hardware. I've had a lot of questions about, like, can I make a vibrator out of an Arduino or out of an ESP32, something like that? And then how can I hook it up to Buttplug? How can I get all these control systems to work? So that's kind of it for where I see the lectures right now. Once again, this all depends on how many people show up, how many people are interested, so on and so forth. So without that, let's get into the big question. What is Teledildonics? We just don't know. teledildonics is a word that was coined quite a while ago. So teledildonics itself started with the word dildonics. It was coined by Ted Nelson in 1974 as part of his book Computer Liberation. And dildonics was about was a term that Nelson used to discuss objects and inventions that could be used for sexual interaction. At the time, he was talking about an inventor, Hal Weichspross, something like that, who was making this sort of haptic actuator through sound. So think of it like a subwoofer that would make things vibrate. And Nelson pointed out that this device could be used for sex, and the field of devices that could be used for sex became teledildonics. And Ted Nelson was, of course, coining all sorts of shit at the time. We got hyperlink, we got Xanadu, we got all sorts of shit. Virtuality, yeah. So 1989 comes along, 1990 comes along, as does Mondo 2000, and and people on my Discord have just yelled at me for not telling them that the live stream has started. I'm still getting used to this. Okay, there we go. Sorry, a little bit of a social media break there. Anyways, teledildonics, coined by Howard Rheingold in 1990 in an essay for Mondo 2000. And one of the awesome parts about not doing this in a classroom and just sitting in my house means I can sit here and read this full fucking essay to you because it's only a page and a half. So I am reading this out of NetSexXX, which is a reader that was put out in 2000s. 2004. So this was a NetSex reader put out in 2004, has a lot of great authors in it. Dennis Waskell was the lead editor. Dennis was doing a lot of work in the time on cybersex and textual sexuality. So he has another book that's over there that I can't get to because I have headphones on, called Self-Play and Body. Oh, god damn it. Here we go. Self Games and Body Play. That was all about the sociology of late 90s text cybersex. Really awesome book. Used a lot of Goffman's theories of the dermatological theories of sociology to kind of talk about how people interact intimately online through like IRC and MUDs and things like that. So whether it's quite as useful today, good question. It's been 22 years, but we all still use text too. There's sexting and whatnot. So anyways, NetSex, awesome book, has more Waskell in it, has Trudy Barber, who is another one of the pioneers, but most importantly, it has Howard Rheingold's Teledildonics essay in it. So this was the essay out of Mondo 2000 that started the word we all know and love and are here for right now. Teledildonics, reach out and touch someone. The first fully functional teledildonics system will probably not be a fucking machine. You will not use, and here, I'll switch to, everyone get comfy, it's reading time now, just don't fall asleep. Anyway, the first fully functional teledildonics system will probably not be a fucking machine. You will not use erotic telepresence technology in order to have sex with machines. 20 years from now, and now being 1990, so this is thinking, 2010, when portable telediddlers are ubiquitous, people will use them to have sexual experiences with other people at a distance in combinations and configurations undreamt of by pre-cybernetic voluptuaries. Through the synthesis of virtual reality technology and telecommunications networks, you will be able to reach out and touch someone or an entire population in ways humans have never experienced before. Dildonics, it had to happen. It is the unnatural fruit of unnatural fruit of the marriage of lust and craft. The word dildonics was coined by visionary computer pontiff Ted Nelson in 1974. Ted is best known as the inventor of hypertext and the designer of the world's oldest unfinished software project, appropriately named Xanadu. As originally conceived, Dildonics described a machine invented by San Francisco hardware hacker Hal Walkspress, a device capable of converting sound into tactile sensation. It was patented later. The erogenic effect depends upon you, the consumer, where you, the consumer, decide to interface your anatomy with the tactile simulator. Picture yourself a couple of decades hence getting dressed for a hot night in the virtual village. Before you climb into a suitably padded chamber and put on your head-mounted display, you slip into a lightweight, eventually one would hope diaphanous, bodysuit. It would be something like a body stocking, but with all the intimate snugness of a condom. Embedded in the inner surface of the suit, using a technology that does not yet exist, is an array of intelligent effectors. These effectors are ultra-tiny vibrators of varying degrees of hardness, hundreds of them per square inch, that can receive and transmit a realistic sense of tactile presence in the same way a visual and audio display transmits a realistic sense of visual and auditory presence. You can reach out your virtual hand, pick up a virtual block, and by running your fingers over the object, feel the surfaces and edges by means of the effector that exert counterforces against your skin. The counterforces correspond to the kind of forces you would encounter with handling a non-virtual object of a specific weight, shape, and texture. You can run your cheek over virtual satin and feel the difference that you encounter when you encounter virtual human flesh. Or you can gently squeeze something soft and pliable and feel it stiffen and rigidify under your touch. Now, imagine plugging your whole sight, sound, touch, telepresence system into a telephone network. You see a lifelike but totally artificial visual representation of your body and of your partners. Depending where you go and where you are allowed and what you are willing to pay or trade or do, you can find one partner, a dozen, 1,000, in various cyberspaces that are no further than a telephone number. Your partners can move independently in cyberspace, and your representation, aka puppets, or what would come to be later known as avatars, are able to touch each other, even though your physical bodies may be continents apart. Each nook and protuberance, each plane and valley and knob of your body's surface will require its own processor. Technically, this is a limiting factor in the evolution of teledildonics, the development of extremely powerful computers to perform the enormous number of calculations required to monitor and control hundreds of thousands of sensors and effectors. Fiber optic networks can already handle the very high bandwidth that telepresence requires, but it may take decades to develop the mesh of tiny, high-speed, safe but powerful tactile effectors. Today's vibrations are in the ENIAC era. ENIAC was the first electronic digital computer. The tool I am suggesting is much more than a fancy vibrator, but I suggest we keep that archaic name. A more sober formal description of the technology would be tactile telepresence, and it is much more than a gleam in the eye of the horny hardware hacker. Part of the infrastructure for a dildonic system exists already in the form of computerized clothing and head-mounted displays that permit people to enter a fully 3D illusion of artificial reality. Teledildonics is inevitable given the rate of progress in the enabling technologies of shape memory alloys, fiber optics, and supercomputing. Enormous market-driven forces will be unleashed when sex at a distance becomes possible. Questions of morality, privacy, personal identity, and even the very definition of eros will be up for grabs. Fucking prescient shit right there. If everybody could look as beautiful, sound as sexy, and feel as nubile and virile as everyone else, what then will have erotic meaning? If you can experience sexual frisson or deep physical communication with another person with no possibility of pregnancy or VD, what then of conventional morality? If you can map your hands to your puppet's legs and your fingers do the walking through cyberspace, there is no reason to believe that you wouldn't be able to map your genital effectors to your mutual sensors and have direct genital contact by shaking hands. Wash your hands. What will happen to social touching when nobody knows where anybody else's erogenous zones are located? Clearly, we are on the verge of a whole new semiotics of mating. Privacy and identity and intimacy will become tightly coupled into something we don't yet have a name for. In Unix systems, files and programs and groups of users can be grouped into nested hierarchies by a system of permissions. The protocols of passion are something that we can only guess at now. In cyberspace, your most public persona, the way that you want the world to see you, will be universally readable. So 666 in terms of Unix permissions. If you decide to join a group at a collegial or a peer level, or decide to become informationally intimate with an individual or group, you will share the public keys to your identity permission access codes. The physical commingling of genital sensations might come to be regarded in time as a less intimate act than the sharing of your innermost self-representations. Finally, with all of those layers of restricted access to self-representations that may differ radically from layer to layer, what happens to the self? Where does identity lie? And with our information machines so deeply intermingled with our bodily sensations, as Ted Nelson might say, will our communication devices be regarded as its, or will they be part of us? So, there you go. That is how Teledildonics started. And, of course, I also realized I meant 444, not 666. So, whoever just got angry at me for getting Unix permissions wrong, I hope you feel validated now. So, anyways, that was 1990. And now we can actually get into what hardware sprang up in the almost 30 years after that now. Okay, well, so much for tabbing all of that in. Here we go. So, in the early 90s, there was art. And I think I actually forgot to bring up a page with this art on it. But let's look at your stall stencily. So, there were a few artists at the beginning of the 90s doing really interesting body work with machines and intimacy and everything else. So there was Stall Stensley, there was Stellark, Trudy Barber. I'm sure there are other ones. Looking for the Cyber SM project here. Here we go. So this was a set of hardware that someone could use as part of the art project. And then I believe someone else, there was ways for participants with the art project to manipulate each other through this hardware. And it was really groundbreaking for the time of 1993. Moving on to 1998, when we start talking about consumer hardware, there was the SafeSex Plus. The SafeSex Plus, I can't really find a great picture of it here, and this is on the Internet Archive because this page is very old. So here we go. SafeSex Plus converter box. There we go. The SafeSex Plus was a suction cup that you would put on your monitor that had a little photodiode in it. So it came with software and also some special movies that were encoded that had like a little box that would turn from black to white. So it would basically change the luminance level of your monitor at that point. So the photoresistor would relay a different value, and that would actually control your sex toy. So it didn't require any hooking to the computer. There was no DB9 for serial or DB23 for parallel or anything else. It was just fucking suction cup on your goddamn monitor. Of course, with a CRT monitor like that, you're going to experience massive amounts of light bleed and pixel bleed from that. So it was not the best way to control things, but it worked. And really it was $24.99 in 1998. Like, that's anywhere from excuse me, like an eighth to a tenth, or a tenth to like 20th of the price of comparable stuff these days. It's really kind of ridiculous. So moving on from that to the let's see, what do I have next? The oh yeah, the mid 90s. So that's when we move into Highjoy and Simulate. Um, and answering a quick question, there was a question in the YouTube real quick of has anyone used linear actuators with vibrators? So this is moving into the mid 2010s. There was the Fun Factory Stronic line of vibrators. Those used this sort of interesting linear. I don't know if it was a solenoid or what. I see Ben is in the chat right now, and so if anyone can actually elucidate a bit more on the Fun Factory Stronic stuff, that might. I mean, that was kind of what I would expect from if someone is asking if like there's a small like. How do I not have a dildo in reach for this goddamn video? Seriously? Okay. Oh, there it is. Hold on. Okay. And so yeah, I knocked out my webcam doing that. Let me fix that real quick. There we go. Okay, and we're back. So yes, now I have a dildo. So with the Stronic, instead of just vibrating, it actually has this thing that kind of moves back and forth and makes it feel like it's pulsating in a certain way. But okay, that was sort of a side thing. Back to history. Let us go into the 2004 to 2007 range. That's where we get companies like Highjoy. So I once again found this on Internet Archive, and it is amazing. This is such a mid 2000s website. Highjoy and this other company, Simulate, both made toys that you could hook up through. Yeah, you can actually see right here. There's your DB9. So some of these were serial. USB was still not super popular for companies that were trying to do low price controls quite yet. It still had a couple of years to catch on after this, so a lot of the stuff was serial, but it could actually hook up to your computer and be controlled over a network. With Highjoy, it just came with this crappy little like slider controls. One of the more amusing things about Simulate is this motherfucker right here. That is their control panel. So you would have, this is how you actually controlled the toy, and you would have a video somewhere right here, and you could like move these throttles and stuff. So yes, it's a cockpit. Someone actually tried to make a product this way. So yeah, the mid 2000s were a weird time. Moving to the late 2000s, we have the Real Touch, which still to this day is one of the most advanced sex toys that ever came out. So the Real Touch was a toy that looked like that, and it was for penile usage, and would do synchronization with movies and other sorts of media. And awesomely enough, And guess who forgot to put an audio capture node, a source on this Okay, sorry, I had to notify the chat that I just lost sound too, and yeah, I fixed it. So anyone in chat, please let me know when you can actually hear me again. Okay, there we go. I think we're good. So, once again, the Real Touch. I'll start from scratch. So this is the Real Touch. Yeah, this thing weighs a good 8 or 9 pounds. It comes with a VGA connector. This is not actually running VGA out. It just needed a bunch of different signal lines, I guess, because there's a ton of shit happening in here. So, if we open it up, there are 2 of these sort of tank tread type deals happening here. These would move back and forth, and they were individually controllable, so you could actually make one move at a different speed than the other. It would synchronize to movies. That was their main claim to fame. Now, one of the interesting parts of this, and something I've seen no one else do, which is good, is that this has a lubrication reservoir in it. So you could actually put lube in this and it would spit it out onto these, which is good because these are incredibly sticky. These were sticky like when it was shipping. And if you ran out of lube on this, it would rip skin off. It was bad. So keeping this thing very, very lubricated was a very big deal. In terms of other features that it had, though, so if we look in here, you can actually see it had heating elements on each side. And then, there we go. This is actually servoed, so you could actually make this open and close, too. You can actually see the that right there would control the tightness of that. Not that you could really feel that because of the way that the nerve endings in the penis work, but it was an interesting idea nonetheless. There is some interesting questions happening on the chat right now of how do you clean this? The answer is very carefully. Let me see. It actually came with here. Let's see what we can see here. Okay, so this shows you kind of the internal breakdown of the system. Do they have anything about cleaning? Here we go. What is the best way to clean it? Yeah, just run the damn thing underwater. But you can't take those belts out. So that's one of the interesting parts of this. And the funny thing is, the community for this lives on to this day. So the Real Touch itself actually went open source. In terms of control, they published an API in 2012 or 2013, right before the toy went under. So you could actually write your own control software and stuff for it. They were one of the first companies to do that. And these days there is still realtouchscripts.com. This is one of the major trading forums for movie scripts, like when I talked about earlier with Sinky Dink, where you can find a script that works with a movie and it'll make the toy move with the movie. This is where you can get this. And so that this still exists. People still sell used Real Touches here. That's how popular this toy is. People are happy to buy it used. Okay, we'll get to Real Touch scripts more when I start talking about movie scripting sometime in the 201 series. Moving into the 2000s, or the 2010s finally. Oh yeah, also for the Real Touch, I highly recommend if you want like a full background on how the thing came together, what the engineers were doing, so on and so forth. Dave Parisi's article, Real Touching from a Distance, in Logic Magazine. It's available online. You can just Google it. Fantastic resource. And I'll have this in the lecture notes too. Finally, coming to the present, there's Kiru, and I mean, these are the names that we know now. Kiru and Lovence and all of these other ones that make the toys that we know today. Like this thing right here, this is a Lovence Lush. The butt plugs I usually have around, or like in images and stuff, those are the Lovence Hush. Kiru makes this big boy right here, the Fleshlight Launch. Though now it is just the Kiru Launch. I believe Fleshlight has taken their name off of it. So those are kind of the big players these days. There's also WoW, who make the WeVibe series, I believe. Or wait, no, that WeVibe is standard. Anyways, there's a few large players, but there's a lot more variety these days because as of August 2018, the Teledildonics patent went up. There was a Teledildonics patent that came together in 1998 that was a huge process patent of like if one toy talks to another toy over the internet or can be computer controlled, this patent covered it. And there is so much text on this now because there was so much fighting over the patent. Right at the end of the patent's lifetime in the 2015-2016 period, a patent troll bought it and took out something like 7 or 8 companies. That was when Commingle died. That was when Love Pals died. So it's been a wild and woolly industry, but that patent went up in August 2018. We're seeing a little bit more of an expansion now in terms of what's available for computer-controlled toys, but now all these companies are dividing up the landscape with sub-patents. So it's like, okay, I'm patenting cam models using toys that are token-triggered or something like that. So things are a little better, but they're still not great. Yeah, so getting back to our PowerPoint here. That is... And also, I mean, the whole reason that things are coming up these days is the rise of the rise of Bluetooth in smartphones. Most people don't want to use this stuff on desktop computers. Most people want to use this discreetly on a phone. And so being able to just pull out your phone and use this stuff, and it makes it as discreet as using the toy itself, if that makes you more comfortable. Or for some people, phones are the only computing platform they have. So that has definitely also increased the popularity. And there are also now toys that have more sensors in them too. So in the past, we've seen a lot of toys with accelerometers and stuff. The Lelo F1S just came out that has an absolutely fucking stupid amount of sensors in it. It's got like accelerometers and Hall effect sensors and all sorts of shit. And I don't know where the fuck you're going to use all those things, but it's got a lot of sensors and it's got an SDK. Cool thing is the SDK is on GitHub with a full Bluetooth protocol. So that's kind of neat. But we're still kind of figuring out what sensors are exactly needed in toys. With the Lelo F1S, they went overboard and it's just like, fuck, let's put all these sensors in. With something like Lioness, though, which is a sort of a sex toy for vagina owners that has a lot of different biosensors in it. There's a lot of cool stuff happening there, and the way that people are kind of taking and using the data from that, either in a medical way or in a I created a new way to translate my sexual data and it's still neat to me way, is kind of cool. I highly recommend if you can ever see Liz Klinger from Lioness Talk. She's amazing, does really cool work with that. So onward and upward. If you are interested in more like in-depth work on the history of teledildonics and sex tech and things like that, I've talked about this a ton over the past 14 years. So I have a couple of other lectures, like my CMU lecture from 2019, or hell, my Ars Electronica lecture from 2007, that goes way more over the history and what's available for this stuff. But for now, I'm trying to kind of pivot over to a new way of presenting this, and that's where we are going with this, with the teledildonic interaction diagram. So, for those of you that may have shown up late, the whole idea for this first presentation is giving us a framework to analyze teledildonic interaction from. So when there is hardware and software and users and everything else, how do all of these things work together to create a teledildonic experience? So from there, it is time for some programmer art. So, oh wow, and I'm off the side of my camera now. Let me fix that real quick. Oh, no, that's the wrong button. There we go. Okay, yeah, there we are. So, make sure this is still working. Yeah. Okay, so this is my little iPad whiteboard here. And I kind of want to draw what I consider to be a teledildonic situation. So, first off, we have our user. Aren't they sexy? And this user wants to use a sex toy. And I am going to see. Good God, that's a fat butt plug. Okay. You would think I was better at drawing butt plugs after this many years of this, and yet. There we go. Okay, there is our user and our butt plug. Now, the question is going to be, they want someone else to control it, or they want some piece of media to control it, or something like that. So for that, they are going to need a computer. And this computer is going to be some seriously fucking 80s bullshit, because I can't really draw whatever a modern computer would be, which would probably actually be a smartphone at this point. But, you know, let's just draw a little happy computer here. It's a little happy CRT. There we go. Okay. And get our keyboard here. Get our happy little keyboard here. Okay, awesome. So, so here we have sort of the three objects in a teledildonic situation. We are going to have our toy, our user, and our computer. Now, there's kind of another question, though, of what's all this shit out here? And this is going to be what we call our environment. Okay, and the environment is out of frame. God damn it. Okay. And oh wow, I even wrote toy out of frame too. Okay, well, for a first time out, the fact that this is working at all is still kind of surprising. So, toy. Okay. Good enough. So yeah, here, I will just, let's see if I can change my frame. Okay, there we go. A little better. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. So how do all of these things interact? Now, obviously, like, the environment is kind of an ambient thing. But the, let me just adjust my icons here. There we go. So the environment is an ambient thing. It's and that's mostly going to be what the user cares about. But how these things work in the environment is going to be part of that consideration. Our interactions here. What are our interactions? So first off, we're going to have our user toy interaction. There's going to be, the user needs to be in contact with the toy somehow. There's going to be the toy computer interaction. So how is the computer controlling the toy? And then there's going to be the user-computer interaction. What is the user doing with the computer to cause the toy control to change? And then finally, the thing that we aren't really talking about yet, because this is all a solo situation right now, is what happens when we go out to our cloud. So we can call this the network. And it's going to be, okay, yeah, I'll write that outside of the cloud. So the computer here will be talking to another computer somewhere else. And for now, what we're going to do is consider this to be a symmetric setup. So someone on the other end is going to have this exact same poorly drawn situation going on. So this is how I kind of view the design of a teledildonic interaction. Now let's actually go through these components. So first off, there was, the user, the environment, the link between the user and the toy, which I call the user-toy interface, the link between the toy and the computer, which I call the toy-computer interface, the link for the user and the computer, which I call user-computer interface, and the reason it's not human I'll get to in a sec, and the link from the computer to another computer, which I'm not going to call it the computer-computer interface. I'm going to call it the network interface. I don't care if you're running TCP/IP or SPX/IPX or whatever else. It's a network. And we're going to assume that it's symmetric for now. Now, once we get into Teledildonics 201, this becomes a completely different topology. This could be multiple people on the other side controlling one person's toy. This could be multiple people trying to all hook through the same central server to control someone else's or a group's toy or something like that. That's when things get super complicated. For now, we just want user, toy, computer, user, toy, computer. So let's talk about the user a bit. The user is going to be the center of our design. We aren't the toy and the computer don't really have much in the way of desires in this setup. Everything revolves around the user and what their partner or the interface that they are using to control this toy is. For Teledildonics 101, we're going to assume dyadic interaction for the sake of simplicity. What that means is two people. A dyad is the sociological term for a group of two. So you have one user on one end, one user. I'm not really assuming a large geographic distance between them. They could be in the same goddamn room, but they both have a toy. They both have a computer that's controlling that toy. So, like I said earlier, with different topologies and stuff, parallelizing the hardware-based romancing of your polycule is a 201 topic. We'll get there. Don't worry. I realize that this is somewhat limiting right now, but we got to start somewhere, and let's add 1 plus 1 before we add God knows what plus God knows what. Why am I using user and not human? This is an affordance specifically to the context of this talk, because this is about sex. And I am part of the furry community. I deal with a lot of other communities where people may not want to be human in this context. And if I start using human-computer interaction and whatnot, that's going to start causing some friction there. So I decided to go with user interaction. Now, user itself still sounds a little weird depending on the context and stuff, but I really did not have much time to put this together, and so the affordance can only go so far. So that is why we are using user here. What is the environment? So the environment is everything that surrounds this combination of user and computer and toy. So this whole thing around, this whole thing that encompasses this is the environment. Does the environment encompass itself? I don't want to get involved in that philosophical conversation. So anyways, when we are thinking about the environment, why is this important? Go visit the Fleshlight subreddit. I feel kind of weird pointing them out, but it's one of the few places I've seen where there is a lot of worry about, and it's very public, about bringing toys into a house that may not be your own. You may have a roommate or a family member or something like that that you don't want to see having that you don't want to see that you have that toy. That consideration is huge in Teledildonics, because these toys not only have to be stored somewhere and they can be large, they have to be bought somewhere first. Like, can you order it online? A lot of these things you can't order from, or you can't just like go down to your like down the block sex store or whatever else. So you have to figure out how you're going to order it. Will it show up on your credit card bill? Things like that. Then there's going to be, how is it shipped to you, which I already covered with the Fleshlight subreddit example. And then, once again, specific to toys with motors and things in them, is it too loud or obvious for its operating environment? To use it, it's going to have to make noise. And then you're going to have to store it somewhere too. And storing something like this is a little bit different than storing something like this. And of course, this thing too, like the Fleshlight launch, let me just get it moving up and down. If I can do this, damn it, come on. There we go. So it's not super loud. It's a little bit louder if I actually had a fleshlight around, but they're on the other side of the room because I am horrible at planning. But anyways, people are going to notice if you're using it, especially once you put an actual fleshlight in it, because an actual fleshlight weighs a couple of pounds, so this thing has to move the couple of pounds up and down, and then you have to hold it in certain ways and everything. So people are going to hear that. And that can move up to sorry, hold on. That can move all the way up to really large toys. Like I have the Motor Bunny here. The Motor Bunny, which I'm not going to pull out because it's gigantic, is a basically it's a Sibian clone. Actually, fuck it. I can get it real quick. This is the Motor Bunny. So this thing will actually make full buildings shake. It is very loud. It puts out a lot of power. It's basically made to liquefy inside. Now, when you have something like that, like the Motor Bunny will run you anywhere from $900 to $12. Actually, I think the Motor Bunny buck is about $1,400. At that point, when you're buying at that price, you know what you're getting. But when people are wanting to buy smaller toys, once again, like the Lush or like the Fleshlight launch is about as large as it gets for lower level consumer toys. I mean, there is also like the Vor's A10 Cyclone SA, which is another kind of large one, also kind of noisy. But those are about as large as you get before you get to like the really big professional stuff. Professional. So yeah, that's what we have to think about when we're thinking about an environment of a teledildonic interaction. Next slide. Okay, so the toy user interface. Now we start talking about how a user interacts with the piece of hardware they want to use intimately. This encompasses both the toy shape and functionality. So a combination of how do you stick it where you want to stick it, and how do you like press the buttons on it and everything else too. Both of these are very important things, because it turns out if the stop button is in a hard place to get, that sucks. And a lot of this is, once again, affordances of the body that is using it. So what is the shape and size of the body? How can that actually change the interaction? Can you get to your keyboard around it if you need to, or use a phone while you're using it? Something like that. The example I'll use here is, once again, the Launch versus a toy called the Handy. So I've got both these down here, and this time I actually remember to go to full screen. So this is the Handy. This is the Launch. The Handy, same basic idea as the Launch, but in a much different form factor, and I forgot to get the goddamn power plug for it. So there's no battery in this. It only plugs in. That's actually a good thing. So this just move, like, you can strap something into this. So you like strap an Ona hole or something like that into it, or it actually ships with little latex inserts or silicone inserts, and you can move it up and down like this. Now the motor in this thing, dead fucking quiet, but the interesting part is the way you use it. So let's look at this. Like, with this is going to be used by someone usually at a computer or something like that. So for the Fleshlight Launch, like, you can kind of set it right there, and the hole is in the middle. So the flashlight's going to be right there, and so it actually has a little rubber bumper on the bottom of it, because that's kind of a weird place to put things. But you can just kind of hold it right there. You can prop it on things and whatnot. Now the Handy, on the other hand, while it can move a lot and a lot more with a lot more granularity, the control of it's a lot better, hell of a lot quieter. You kind of it's made to actually be used like this. So you actually kind of have to hold it because your controls are up here. So it's much better used laying down. Like, if I could like lay all the way back or something like that, that would be great for this. Using it in a chair, a little bit different. People do use it that way, and it apparently works for them, and that's fine. It's just things you have to think about when you are dealing with bodies. The thing is too, I mean, I got a little bit of a gut. I'm not saying I'm perfect here, but if you have someone that does weigh a little bit more or something like that, and they need to actually be able to get this in and around, that could be a problem for them. On the topic of people that own vaginas, that comes in with these things too, where these things can be either too large or too rigid or something like that. For instance, this is the Mina Kegel, and there were actually quite a few reviews of this where this was just too wide, and what's in here is actually fairly hard. So it was actually apparently fairly painful for quite a few people to use because of the size of the entry that it required, and then the way that it felt inside the vagina. So these are all things that have to be thought about because you're developing a sex toy that possibly goes inside someone, and bodies are weird and hard. So one of the things to think about too is, like, how do you turn it on and off? Like with the Launch, for instance, there's like multiple modes for turning it on and off. So if I turn it on right now, let me get back over to the iPhone camera here. If I turn this on right now, but I accidentally hit this button, now it's in manual mode. It won't actually connect to Bluetooth, or won't actually be controllable by Bluetooth anymore. But if I brush it again, oh, hey, we're back to Bluetooth now. And there's also no buttons on this thing. It's actually all like slide and gesture controls, which is interesting because like buttons can get gummed up, especially when your hands are lubey or something like that. But you have to think about, like, in the heat of the moment when someone's like using this and possibly like having such a good time with it that there is involuntary muscle contractions or something like that. It's going to possibly get in the way or possibly be turned off or something like that. So that's kind of how you have to think about how the user is going to use the toy and control it. Finally, really though, in the end, meat cages are difficult. Bodies are fucking hard. Like, everyone has one and they're all different, and no one will come up with a goddamn standard outside of much of anything, really. And it's one of the hardest problems, and it is possibly the hardest problem in sex toys. Yes, all this like interaction and design stuff is like difficult, but is it really as important as if it doesn't fit with your body, if it hurts, if it doesn't work right, so on and so forth? No one's going to use it anyways. Everything we do is after this point. So, yeah, so how do we be inclusive for all body types? How do we build for being accessible for the disabled? Is there a way to make sure that the buttons will work or whatnot? Or if there is some sort of computer interface, that it is safe and it keeps connected to the toy the way it needs to? Okay, on to the toy computer interface. So this is how the toy talks to the computer. This is going to be one of the more technical areas here. How does a computer connect to the toy? So that's going to be Bluetooth, USB, serial, whatever else. How does the computer tell toys to do things? This is what we call a protocol. So if we wanted, say, this thing to vibrate, we actually send a string that's vibrate : and then a number between 0 and 20 and then a semicolon. That is the Levin's protocol. It is actually all string based. But all of these things have completely different ways of controlling them. What are the capabilities that are exposed on the toy too? So as part of the protocol, how much can you say it vibrates? Does it go from 0 to 4, 0 to 20, 0 to 256, 0 to 65,535? And that was Kiru, Levin's, PPGing, and X input, respectively. So, like I said, this is one of the more technically focused sides of this whole interaction model, but it requires all of the considerations of everything around it. How much control and accuracy do we really want? What do we think the user will want to do with this so we don't over-design? Things like that. This is also the realm of where Buttplug, the library that I produce that we are going to see a URL, well, we just saw a URL of over in the advertising thing right there. This is what Buttplug does. So Buttplug handles all of this for you. So all you can do is, if you write a program, you just send a vibrate command, and then it does all the rest of this crap of how do I talk to Bluetooth or USB or serial or whatever else. What does this toy actually need to hear to vibrate? Things like that. We take care of all that for you, and that'll be handled, or that'll be covered more in one of the later lectures when we get into more of the technical stuff. User-computer interface. So this is how the toy is interacted with and controlled with via the computer. And I'm going to say, too, this framework is not... I literally came up with this last night while I was writing these slides. So this is not foolproof, because there's like these interesting questions of, well, there's a sensor on the toy, and then the sensor on the toy is part of the protocol that goes to the computer, but then is that part of the user computer interface or what? So there's still a lot of things to work out in terms of model complexity within this framework, but for now it seems like a good basis to work with. So user computer interface, this is how the toy is interacted with and controlled by the user via the computer. This can be like a slider that you move around to make the toy move faster, vibrate faster or slower, or stroke or something like that. This could be the movie interface that I've mentioned already, where the video can synchronize with the toy. This could be a game where doing something in the game makes the toy move faster. It could be other people doing any one of the three things I just already mentioned. Basically, it's fucking anything the computer does that affects the toy. and possibly the user too, because that's kind of the interesting part here. Would the user get off if they were just using, like, let's say they were using a toy with a movie, take away the visual side of it, just play back that action, would they still get off, or is that actually part of the content part of the interface too? And for the other people part of this interaction, how do we say what the other person can do with our toys? Because let's say I, for instance, have a vibrator, but I also have a shock collar. Like, shock collars are a big fucking deal. I get questions about them constantly for Buttplug. And you want one person to just be able to access the vibrator, but maybe you trust someone else more, and you do want to have that sort of punitive experience with them. How do you create that type of consent and interface within the computer interface to say, this person can shock me, this person can only vibrate me? And obviously there's security implications in there too, because then if you were saying, well, this person can shock me, that means that the computer is capable of shocking you anyways. So if someone can go around that consent, if your application is not built in a way that is secure, then other people may be shocking you too, and that could suck. So this could mean, sensors on the toy, which make this diagram weird and complicated, like I already said. This shit's complicated. There's a lot of shit that can possibly go on here in this type of framework. So for user-computer interface, this is where I spend a lot of my time trying to think about, okay, well, someone already made this hardware. I don't really have a lot of control over that because I don't want to go spend the money to make my own, and I don't really feel like I have a good place to understand what a whole bunch of users want. So I would rather them go buy their toy, and then I'll help them build the interface to that toy via their computer, because it could be that the manufacturer of that toy doesn't really provide what they want, something like that. So I see that as a lot of what the Teledildonics 201 series here is going to cover. Computer interfaces, aka networks. So networks and computers talking to computers, that means networks and protocols and all the security problems that come with them. So right now I will pitch my usual pitch of, if you are interested in that sort of thing, I highly recommend the Internet of Dongs. So this is at, let me bring up the web browser here, Internet of Don.gs. Fantastic blog, Twitter account, and security researcher RenderMan that's doing really cool work with sex and technology and the security around it, helping companies secure down secure down their data and how their toys talk to the network and how all the users talk to each other. So this is one of the most difficult parts of the system to build, because you don't control a lot of it. All you can do is control what's coming in and out. Maybe you control the server side if you're lucky. But depending on where you're pinging your data and stuff, it can be really, really hairy. And then the question is, too, what kind of network structure do we want? Do we want peer-to-peer? Do we want a central server where people can all just log in and find each other, but everything's stored in the same place? For this demo app that we're doing as part of Teledildonics 101, I honestly haven't decided which one of these we're going with yet, and it could be that we go with both. Since we're going to be working in a web browser, we do have WebRTC, which is a way to do a peer-to-peer connection, but it does require you have to both connect to what we call a stun server to punch through NAT and whatnot. I'm getting really technical here really quick, sorry. Basically, to be able to find each other, you have to connect to an outside server, but then you're talking directly to each other. But we could also just have a central, like, say, WebSocket server or something. Each one of these has their pros and cons, and I may go over that later. I'm just still trying to figure out the scope of exactly what we want to do at this time. So this shit is also so fucking complicated. And a ton of time will be spent here too, because if we fuck this up, oh my god. Oh my god. Every fucking media, like piece of press and media will be all over your ass. You do not want to fuck up when people are fucking with your software. And it's really, really difficult to make sure you get it all right. There are some points where you just have to do your due diligence as best you can, talk to people that know what they're doing, and go from there. So, design intent. Now that we've gone through this whole, like, we've really kind of broken down this picture, this horrible picture of what it's like to have sex through a teledildonic interface. Oh, God. We can start talking about, once again, the system as a whole and how do we design into this. So what is the goal of a hardware-enabled intimate interface? So when we talk about teledildonic design intent, what we want to do is, with our software, we want the webcam to go out again. Hold on just a second. That went out at a really funny point, though. Okay, and we're back. So when we are designing a teledildonic application, we are not the center of the show. As I said back in the user portion, the user is the center of the show. All we want to do is get the user hooked up to their hardware and get them to either their content, be it a video or a game or someone else controlling them, and then we want to make sure our shit works and stay the fuck out of the way otherwise. Now, to explain what I mean by that, I've come up with this idea of that intimate technology works as what I'm going to call proxemic glue. And due to the fact that I forgot to put a fucking demo image of Proxemics in here, we're going back to the goddamn programmer art. Where did my... Oh, shit. Okay, I've been using my Apple Pencil so much as a gesturing device that I actually forgot where I put it. There it is. Okay. Let me bring this back up. And so, Proxemics. Proxemics is an idea that I have been looking at way the fuck too much lately, and I would really like to stop talking about it, but it keeps fucking coming up everywhere. Proxemics was created is a field of study created in the mid-60s by Edward Hall, a sociologist who was doing a lot of work on... the ideas of bodies in space and how they deal with each other in that space and the spaces they take up. So in this book right here, The Hidden Dimension, Hall was talking about kind of like different cultures, and it was a very 60s like sociology kind of anthropology sort of feel where it's like, this culture does this, and this culture does this. But what Hall was talking about there was like, let's say here's you. Here's you, and here's your shoulders. And I am the worst at top-down drawing now. Okay, and you can have some hair. There you go. This is you. You have different sort of areas that other people can come into. Within, let's see here, 3 and 4. Okay, and now it looks like you're about to throw a goddamn shot put, but excuse me for just a sec. I need to open up so I can read my text here. So there are 4 different zones of proxemics. There's the public, the social, the personal, and the intimate. So these are all spaces that other people can come into. So when we talk about like public space, that's like someone's like on a podium talking to you or something. That's like huge public address, 25 feet or farther away. And you can't actually say that 25 feet. Okay, 25 FT. There we go. Fucking hell. 25 FT. So within that, like, there is also so each zone here has a close and a far phase. Close, that's like 12 feet. So that's like yelling at a neighbor across the street or something like that. When we start getting into the social zone, let's call this like 7 to 12 feet. That's going to be like formal discourse, like, and so all of this is, say you're talking to someone else, what does the space between you and that other person mean? So the far social distance, think of like sitting across from a manager in an office or something like that. Like, they are like, either you are behind a desk or they're behind a desk and you are on the other side of that desk in a chair. That's kind of the formal business distance there. Once we get any closer, like that's going to be 4 to 7 feet. Then that's kind of more informal, impersonal distance. That's like when you're around the water cooler or something at work, or when you're talking to a friend or something like that. And my video went out again. So let me fix my this webcam. Damn you. Okay, there we go. So webcam's back up. So the close social phase, that's like when you're just standing around having a conversation with someone. Once we get past that, now we're down into the personal. The personal is going to be 2.5 to 4 feet, and these are all ranges that Hull came up with in the late 60s, but they still work pretty well today. This is kind of arm's length, so close enough for nonverbal communication, so you can actually start like smelling people, like seeing people's tics, things like that, where you can get like a little bit more of a visceral sense of their communication type while you're talking to them or while you're interacting with them. And then when we get into the close distance, now you can start hugging them. So that's actually when you are super close to someone else. Like, you have the potential to grasp them, the potential to hold hands or something like that. It could also be a violent encounter too. So basically it can be considered a space and a proximity of vulnerability. And then finally we get down into the intimate. So this is going to be like, outside of this is going to be your 6 to 18 inches. So that's going to be like kissing distance, cuddling distance. And then finally, when we get to the close phase of intimacy, that's your fucking distance right there. That is the realm of actually having sex. So, and I'm just going to make an aside real quick. If we talk about social distancing, that social distancing right now is considered to be 6 feet between people, I believe. So social distancing lands us directly in the middle, or like right near that middle of the social close and far phase. So right now, with our current situation, we have wiped out any chance of the personal and intimate happening between someone we do not know, do not trust, may not have a relationship with. There's a whole other fucking discussion to be had about what that's going to affect in terms of nonverbal communication and how we deal with this. That's just a point that I'm going to make right now because it is the time that it is. But I could spend another few fucking hours talking about that. I am on Twitter right now. I'm getting fuck all done otherwise, thanks to that. So, going back to our point though. So, what does it mean for technology to be social glue? Now, if we look at this really shitty diagram that I have drawn here, you usually are not within 6 to 8 inches of someone that you are, or 6 to 18 inches of someone that you're using an app with, unless you are curled up in bed with someone both looking at your phones, which is completely valid. But outside of that situation, you are not usually using an app with that person, though. You can still communicate at that. With people that you are communicating with apps with, so through, say, an instant messenger or Discord or Slack, or even something a little bit more asynchronous like a dating app or a social network like Twitter or Facebook or something like that, you're not going to be anywhere in any of these zones. Like, even if they're 25 feet away, you can yell at a motherfucker. So you will probably choose to do that unless there is some reason for you not to yell. But in terms of just general social interaction, there it is. So the reason that I call intimate apps and really social apps in general a proximate glue is because they fill the space that is between you and the other person where you would want them to be proximically. So we can say that something like Twitter or Facebook, or that actually has a broadcast mechanism, is a social glue into the public realm. So you're getting information from them, but it's still got that sort of... Let me just write this down. Twitter, Facebook. It's still got that sort of shouting feel. You may not be able to interact back much with them. There may be so many people between you and them that it's impossible to actually have a full-on interaction. And not to mention, with that type of broadcast, you are also going to lose a lot of... I mean, we don't really have the nonverbal communication means if we're getting something off Twitter. We can't see, like, what face the person was making while they were tweeting or something like that. So you've already lost that anyways. But now we lose even more, too, because there's no way really to respond, or you may be in a flood of responses from a mob of people, depending on how badly that person needs to be canceled. When we talk about Teledildonics now, though, that means that we need to create the proximic glue to be in this area. That is fucking hard. Because broadcasting is pretty easy. Like, at least in technical terms. We can just throw shit out there. It's easy to broadcast packets. If we actually need to make someone feel close to someone else and have to do that through the fucking, like, 5 layers of mittens that is creating technology, that's a very, very difficult thing to do. So that's why I call this the proximate glue, though. Like, it needs to fill that space and make things stick together. It's just this weird thing of the further apart it is, the less the glue needs to be. I think the less complex the glue needs to be. It's kind of an inverse of the actual physical realm. So to go through my points here in the slides, when you're what you're providing with your app, with your teledildonic or intimate experience, takes up space between whatever the user is having sex with. This might be content or might be another person. So that space is extremely wide compared to non-technologically mediated communication, which is a really fancy way of saying if I'm fucking someone that's right next to me and we are actually fucking, there's a lot less actual space between us than if we are trying to fuck online using teledildonic technology. So your app needs to kind of make up for as much of that space as possible. Will it make up for all of it? Hell no. And it won't for years. Like, we don't have the technology to do that, and what you mostly need to rely on there is brain chemistry. Like, you need to harness the emotions that the user has for either the other user on the end, the other users on the end, or whatever content they're dealing with. Like, you really have to harness the shit out of brain chemistry there, because the haptics are not going to get you very far. So this space is already extremely wide compared to not being in real life. There are so many things that can go wrong, too. The Bluetooth can fall out, the network can go off, the toy can run out of power, who knows fucking what. you do not want to add to that space too. If you are creating these interfaces, you want to look at that analysis framework in a way that allows you to minimize the space as much as possible within your power. You cannot do everything, like I just said. Like, you're still dependent on, like, this is a weirdly enough, this is a situation of bringing two people together that requires tens of thousands of people, from writing the OS to writing the networks to putting together all the hardware between this computer and all the routers and shit in between and everything else. You are working and fucking in the framework that millions of people have worked on for decades. But it wasn't made for fucking. So you kind of have to take all of this shit into mind when you are designing. Whether you need to concentrate on all of that is a really good question, because it will drive you insane if you do. You do have to stop at some point and ship something. But it is good to at least be aware of all of these levels. And that's where we end with the two definitions of fuck around and find out. So obviously with Buttplug, with building your own DIY Teledildonics interfaces in general, this is the rule to have. Fuck around and find out what happens. Like, you really do want to play around with this stuff. You never know how users are going to react. You never know how you're going to react if you want to play with it yourself. You will discover new things. This is definitely one of those things where the journey may be far, far more worth it than the end goal. However, if you are planning on shipping this to users, and those users do not know you, and they are not your friends, and especially if they are paying you, fuck around and find out what happens when you fuck up your user's sex because you did not build your designs right, or your software or hardware was not reliable. If you get in the way of someone else's sex, you better have a pretty good reason for them to come back. Otherwise, they're gone forever. There is only so much that this hardware can get you, and there are people that are going to want what this hardware can get you. Whether that is the mainstream, whether that is enough to run a business or whatever else, is a huge question. And like, these companies are living right now. I mean, they're like, Kiru is still a going concern. Levins is still a going concern. There are places for these toys, and you may find your niche that you like, especially if you check around like Patreon, for instance. You can live as a solo creator and whatnot, but there's a lot to think about here and a lot to get right. What I try to do with Buttplug is to eliminate one part of that that's extra boring, that most people don't want. But Buttplug is still nothing without interfaces on top of it. And that's kind of where we're going to be going in the next couple of lectures. So, that is it. I have just talked for pretty much an hour and 39 minutes straight. But that's kind of how we are going to be approaching building our own sex toy interface and our own dyadic Teledildonics application over the next couple of lectures. So within that design, I'll be talking about, okay, what is the user computer design? What is the toy computer stuff that Buttplug is taking care of for you? What is the environment that the user can use this in? Because even the computer itself is part of the environment. Like, if you can just bring up a web page that is a sex and that is a sex and Teledildonics application, and then you can close it easily and it's not installed anywhere, that is actually an affordance of the environment that the software is run in. So all of this shit matters. And it's a lot to take in, which is why I'm doing this in multiple sessions, because I can also only talk for so long, and I would really also like to figure out why the fuck my webcam keeps stopping. But anyways, I'm now going to shut up and let people that are listening or watching ask questions. If you are watching this after the live stream, and you have questions, please contact me via one of the social media things that's been happening right there for the past hour and a half. Comment in the YouTube video, if there is still a YouTube video, or the Pornhub comments, or whatever else. Find some fucking way to get a hold of me. But anyways, I'm now going to sit here and wait for the video buffering to catch up to see if anyone has questions. So this is going to be kind of awkward. Okay, and we're waiting. Okay, how does VR fit into all of this? Holy fucking shit. Okay, that's a big question. VR is mostly fits into this as an immersive environment where Teledildonics becomes an augmentation of that immersive environment. So yet again, it's an add-on. What can happen there is the easiest one is usually, once again, movies. So instead of watching a 2D movie on like one of my monitors here or something like that, I can like strap on my trusty Oculus Rift here and watch a what we call a 180 SBS movie. So this is a special way of filming a video with a fisheye lens where one eye sees one thing, one eye sees the other. You put it together and you get porn with really, really big people in it. Because there's issues with the way that we track the perception of size in those movies. So super popular with macro people. Anyways, those are still just regular old movies, though. So, like Sinky Dink, the web-based video player I mentioned earlier, it can play those videos in VR. So we can sync the toy while people are watching VR porn. And that means that they have that extra immersion of the 3D, and a lot of those are done in point of view, too. So they can actually see someone on their body or something like that, and the toy is moving in concert with that. Games, much the same, where you can actually see like a 3D environment. Unlike the movies, it is surround, and the toy will move along with the game or the motion that happens there. I have a video both on this YouTube channel, and there's a better version of it on Pornhub because the game involves a lot of porn, called Vertimate. That people have done a massive amount of motion tracking work with. So they can create environments like with highly detailed 3D models. It's what we call a poke the doll game because you just set up dolls and then you poke them. So Vertimate has the ability to import dolls or import models, I'm sorry, from like DAZ 3D, and then you can set animations to them, and then you can have the toy track the animation. You can actually, here I can just show you. I think I posted this on Twitter not too long ago, so here we go. Yes. Let me bring the web browser back up here and zoom in on this. Okay. I hit the wrong button. Here we go. Yeah, so I can just full screen it. So this is an open source toy called the OSR2. It's a 3D printable toy that it's open source, plans for it on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/TempestVR, TEMPESTVR. In the background is Vertimate, which is a VR game. So you can integrate this toy with that game and have the models move however they would, and actually have the toy move with that. There's also the Vero Play Space. They're actually doing 3D scanned Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna wait on that because I don't want to get another strike against my YouTube channel. uh, so, anyways, with Vero PlaySpace, they're actually taking the cam model situation. So they have a cam model and a full mocap suit, and they will at some point be doing real-time 3D VR cam models. And the interesting part with that is not only will it have the toy interface run by Buttplug, you'll actually be able to switch the skin on the model. So it could be that some model is being seen 5 different ways by 5 different users. So VR, there's a lot going on right now. It's a really interesting space. I'm hoping to attend some of the talks at IEEE VR next week, since it's now all online. So that's a super quick overview of where things are with VR. And any other questions? Oh, this video buffering lag. Okay, so I think I may be pretty good on questions, which means I can hit stop and go eat some dinner and start working on the next set of slides for lecture 2. Thanks to everyone for showing up. I hope this was interesting, and I hope this will prove useful for future times too. Yeah, until next time, which may very well be tomorrow, depending on how much I get done tonight, keep butt plugging.